Hey all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today I'm going to be talking about another prison, and this one is actually going to be over in the UK. So let's get started, shall we? Wakefield House of Correction opened in 1595 after a £20 endowment left by Baronet George Saville in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, England. Those detainees, both women and men, would be held at the location until trial. After a conviction, they would be sent to prison or the American colonies. While at the House of Corrections, they were often kept shackled and expected to work or produce wares for selling. Throughout this time, there were several escapes. The largest occurred in 1764, which resulted in the realization that a new prison needed to be built, the plans for which were produced by John Carr 2 years later. Then, after July 1776, England was forced to change what they did with their criminals. Instead of sending them to America, they were then sent down under. Yes, that was a transition to send them to Australia. But by the early 19th century, this practice too was ended, and instead prisoners would be held in prisons on England's own soil. In the early 1800s, more buildings were added to Wakefield, including a reception area where inmates were brought in and even seen by a surgeon if needed. It sounded like this is the area where they were washed and given new clothes. In 1823, a house for the prisoner governor was built, along with 193 additional cells. In 1834, Wakefield adopted the silent system, which, if you listen to one of my last prison episodes I did on the prison in Philadelphia, it literally means that inmates cannot speak to each other anywhere. They go to work together silent, they eat silent, everything is silent. It's a noiseless and increasingly isolating system. In the 1840s, overcrowding was already evident. As such, a brand new prison was built, and in 1847, the new prison was up on Love Lane. Bernard Hartley designed this new prison, in which 4 wings were built in a half cartwheel structure around a central location. Each of the wings was 4 stories tall, and in total, it created 732 cells. The prison had minimal education programs, but still, they had education programs at the time, trade work, and even offered an exercise program, indicating brisk walking would be beneficial to the prisoners, especially the elder and the young ones. Unfortunately, this system was picked up by other prisons that was then used as a form of torture, where men would have to walk into a circle, one behind the other, hour after hour. The prison reached full capacity by 1858. The prison grossed £400,000 per year until 1878, and that's when the Prison Act of 1877 was enacted and prison management centralized. In addition, the profit of inmates was no longer acceptable. Shortly after, the prison built a detachment building for female inmates. Before this time, female inmates would be housed in the same unit, usually on different ends of the building. In the early 1900s, the location was often used for those waiting transportation or death, frequently going to York or Leeds for this death to be carried out. Still, between 1905 and 1915, 10 men were hanged within Wakefield, including William Wares Galbraith, a veteran. In 1912, William told his friends that they were going to see a bloody headline soon. Days later, he cut his own wife, Mary's, throat. Mary was 4 months pregnant at the time. Then, in 1914, more changes to the prison, making it an all-male location. Then, in 1916, during the First World War, the prison was taken over by the War Office. The civilian inmates were all removed, and Wakefield acted as a military detention center. In 1918, it housed conscientious objectors as part of the change. A group of the men went on strike and wrote a set of demands for better treatment in September of 1918. This was called the Wakefield Manifesto, but I couldn't find any sources that report that this really turned into anything. What happened was the objectors were returned to harsher prisons. This housing of objectors lasted until 1923, when it returned to housing civilians once again. In 1932, a small group of inmates worked at a nearby Viscount's land. As they did so well, on August 24th of 1935, the prison governor established a small camp of 50 inmates off of the main prison officially. When civilians returned, the prison continued as a high security location, and as such, it began to house IRA prisoners. The IRA here meaning the Irish Republican Army. They were the Irish paramilitary organization with goals to remove British rule in Ireland and unite their country. They are infamously known for their level of violence, including shootings and bombings. On to escapes. In 1952, Robert Harrington Sanders, convicted of the attempted murder of a detective constable, escaped. He was a stoker because he had good behavior, and so he would go out around 8 o'clock at night. One night when he was out on the yard, he simply threw a grappling hook over the wall and climbed to his freedom. In 1956, IRA Chief of Staff Cathal Golding was located at Wakefield when there was an attempt to free him. However, it was unsuccessful. 3 years later, in 1959, Seamus Murphy was successfully freed from the prison. Around this time, 31 escapes or attempts were made at the prison. Of note, another IRA member, Frank Stagg, died on February 12, 1975, after his own hunger strike. In 1969, Wakefield was one of 5 dispersal prisons. This means they housed Category A and B prisoners, which I'll explain momentarily. In 2001, a new ultra-secure unit was set to be built in order to house the worst of the worst offenders, the ones considered too dangerous for general population. As of 2022, Wakefield is a high-security prison for Category A and B male prisoners. This means that the bulk of the inmates have sentences with a minimum sentence of no less than 10 years. Lifers and indeterminate sentences are also included in this. Its operational capacity is 750, and it typically holds just under its maximum operational capacity. As of 2022, again, the number of lifers was 339. 36 were indeterminate. Additionally, 61% of those within the walls were convicted sex offenders. As it holds some of Britain's most notorious criminals, including Robert Maudsley and Harold Shipman, who I've spoken about both of these, the prison has earned itself a nickname, Monster Mansion. The F-wing within the prison is divided into 2 categories, a close supervision center known as an exceptional risk management unit that contains 8 cells housing those who are violent towards others within the prison. On the opposite side is the segregation unit, and most prisons have a seg unit. This one contains 21 cells. And let's not forget Robert Maudsley's cell that was made especially for him in 1983. That space measures 5.5 meters by 4.5 meters with bulletproof windows on one side. In order for him to come out, he'd have to make it through 17 sets of locked doors. And again, if you've ever heard me mention this, which we did in the Robert Maudsley case, this is where if you've ever seen the movie Silence of the Lambs, then you see Hannibal Lecter, this is exactly what his prison cell looks like. Now, onto the categories really quick. Category A prisoners are those that pose the highest threat to national security, the police, and or the public if they escape. Some of the offenses that place them into the category are murder or attempted murder, rape or attempted rape, sexual assault, manslaughter, wounding with intent, kidnapping, and terrorism offenses. Other offenses that can lead a person to be classified as a Category A include the possessing of or supplying explosives, armed robbery, and importing or supplying Class A controlled substances. Category B prisoners are not deemed as high risk as Category A, but they're still up there for risk. While it is a high security prison, visitation is still allowed. Much like other prisons, it requires one person to be 18 years of age when visiting. The visitor needs to be on the inmate's list to visit, and the visitation must be booked at least 2 days in advance. No valuables are allowed to be brought in, though you can bring cash, up to 25 euros, in order to buy food and drink in the visits hall, which is pretty standard. A lot of times you still have to bring a bag of quarters in a clear bag even in the U.S. prisons. 1 in 10 visitors gets selected for an exit search, along with the routine incoming search. In recent events, more murders continue within the walls. Now, as I stated, this prison holds a lot of men convicted of sexual, child, or women crimes. Remember, at one point it was over half, it was 61%. Those who harm children are targeted throughout the world. This isn't just isolated to Wakefield. It just happens to be that there's a larger population here. A couple of the more recent murders include Ian Watkins and Kyle Bevan. C. Watkins was a singer for the Lost Prophets before pleading guilty to multiple child offenses, including attempted rape of a baby. He originally was arrested for drug possession charges, which led to this conviction after they looked over some of his electronic devices, is what it sounds like from sources, and for which he was convicted in 2013 and was serving a 29-year sentence. In 2023, Ian was held hostage and beaten for 6 hours by 3 inmates. He survived this ordeal. Then he was stabbed in the neck on October 11th, 2025, for which he did not survive. Bevan attacked his 2-year-old stepdaughter Lola James on July 20th, 2020, causing 101 separate injuries to her. In the reports that I could find, it sounds like when she was taken to the hospital, he claimed she fell down the stairs, and that the mom was actually never woken up about any of this when it was occurring in the house. She had her own sentence. 4 days later, little Lola succumbed to her injuries. Bevan was sentenced to 28 years. On November 5th, 2025, he was found dead in his cell. 3 other inmates have been charged with his murder. A recent inspection has noted a 62% increase in violence within the prison. Many sources stated that those, especially with child offenses, are speaking out about being afraid for their safety, which, if you know me, I don't have any empathy for these people. I'm all for chemical castration for those who harm women and children. Anyone who can sexualize an infant or a toddler shouldn't be out in society. It's the most depraved thing, and in prison, you kind of get what's coming to you. And for that, I'm never going to be sorry. But with that, that is the end of Wakefield Prison. To all those out there listening, be careful. It really is a dangerous world we live in.